Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us at Peggy Skylight tonight. It's lovely to see so many of you here. And given that we've got so many of you here, I want to hear a really thunderous round of applause as we welcome to the stage, playing the music of Stan Getz, the Chris Ingham Quartet.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to an evening of music associated with Stan Getz. For all Stan Getz's prowess and for all his reputation as a great jazz man, we consider that he's slightly underrated, slightly undervalued by jazz posterity particularly, and I think it's something to do with his sheer consistency over 45 years playing career. He was always unmistakably himself, never less than 100% on it. And I think he was always in danger of being slightly taken for granted for that reason. Doesn't matter what context he was in, he was always completely identifiable as Getz, just being Getz. The other thing is, he had the temerity to have some commercial success as a jazz musician. That never seems to go down well with posterity, I've noticed, when it's written by jazz historians. He was blessed with a music-making ability that seemed to transgress just jazz listeners and go right over into general audience. Ordinary people liked the sound that Stan Getz made. And I think that's another reason why he's slightly undervalued. And this is a man who could have spent most of his playing career just doing Girl from Ipanema in every concert hall in every city in the world for the rest of his life, absolutely making a fortune. And he conspicuously did not do that. He did the very opposite. He made sure that he changed his band, changed his bandmates, played different tunes as often as he could, because he wanted to keep himself stimulated as a musical artist. And for that reason, he's got an amazing musical legacy, and we thought it would be fun to just dip in and just play a few highlights, some of which you'll know, some of which you won't. So that's what we're up to. He got his first break when he was 15 years old in the band of Jack Teagarden, the great trombone player. And Jack Teagarden had to be his legal guardian, which in retrospect possibly wasn't a great idea. Stan learned from Jack not only how to play beautiful mellifluous melodies, but also how to be a professional musician while also being a fully blown alcoholic, which he was by the time he was 16. And that was just the beginning of a lifetime's worth of substance abuse. We might touch on that a little bit later. It's not really the point. Anyway, he joined the Woody Herman Orchestra, became a star, a saxophone star, because he was the featured soloist on a piece of music recorded by Woody Herman, but composed by Ralph Burns. It's a tune called Early Autumn. I'm going to play it for you now. Early Autumn by Ralph Burns was a big hit in 1950. And because Stan Getz was the featured saxophone player, he was all of a sudden a saxophone playing star. Unfortunately, he just left the Woody Herman Band, one of the first of very many flouncing situations in the Stan Getz playing career. However, everyone knew who he was. He just didn't have a band. And so he hit the provinces and started sitting in with the doing out-of-town dates with the local rhythm sections. One of the local rhythm sections featured a piano player called Horace Silver. Stan Getz was rather taken with Horace Silver. And he said, when you get to New York, if you're coming to New York, give me a ring. And Horace had heard all this before. Didn't really take much notice, but when he got to New York, he did give Stan Getz a ring. And sure enough, he got his first job in New York as the piano player in the Stan Getz Quartet. And Stan Getz started a tradition that he would carry on his whole career, which was to ask the piano player if he had any good tunes that he could play. Because of Stan Getz was a brilliant improviser, but he wasn't a composer in that formal sense. He wouldn't sit down, he wouldn't have the discipline and focus to sit down and create a tune, a sculpted composition. He was just creating compositions on the fly all the time. That was his skill. So he would always look to the piano player, have you got any decent tunes? Horace had a trunk full of decent tunes, including this one. This is a tune called Split Kick, which Stan was fond enough of to record twice, in 1951 and 1955. We're going to do a hybrid version of Horace Silver's Split Kick.
One, two, out.
Thank you very much. Horace Silver's split kick. From then, Stan went on to become really part of jazz royalty in the 1950s. He got involved in the Norman Grantz's Jazz at the Philharmonic. He was hanging out with Dizzy Gillespie, Ella Fitzgerald, Oscar Peterson, and he was up there. He was as big as any of them. And he started having hits that other people liked, like that Moonlight in Vermont with Johnny Smith. That was a big pop hit in 1952. It was his way with a ballad that seemed to connect beyond the jazz connoisseurship. Something to do with his sound, a kind of keening, vulnerable cry in his sound, and something to do with his lyricism. Who knows? Something to do with his soul. We're going to do a ballad that he used to like to play in the 1950s. This is from a cult off-Broadway musical called The Nervous Set. It was written by Fran Landesman and Tommy Wolfe. And it's a tune called Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most. Thank you very much. Spring can really hang you up the most. One of the very many ballads that Stan Getz seduced the listening world with in the 1950s. But it wasn't just his ballad playing that gave him the reputation that he had. It was because he was part of he was at the forefront of a modern jazz kind of style of the early 1950s that was sometimes called the cool school. And this was a sort of modern jazz. It was a variant of bebop, but it had a slightly kind of more cerebral air to it. Modern jazz, but with A levels, and a slightly lighter texture. You know, just a little bit of an intellectual kind of bent, really. And one of the great groups of that cool school, sometimes called West Coast jazz, although that was a misnomer because most of the practitioners were actually from the East Coast. One of the bands in the forefront of this cool school movement was the Jimmy Rainey Stan Getz Quintet, Jimmy Rainey being the great guitarist who put together some really lovely, slightly left-of-center tunes like this one from 1952. Not many people do this one anymore, largely because it takes a little bit of rehearsal. Jazz musicians, as you may know, are not that keen on rehearsal. We put together 5 minutes in the sound check, and we've rehearsed this Jimmy Rainey tune for your delectation. This is Signal. Thank you. Signal. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Signal by Jimmy Rainey. We're quite pleased with that. We're quite proud of doing that. Now, the thing is with the Jimmy Rainey, Stan Getz quintet, as great as it was, is it went the way of so many of Stan's professional relationships, which is into the gutter, basically. Stan, as I've mentioned, became an alcoholic fairly early on in his career, but he was a pretty consistent abuser of all kinds of substances. He was addicted for most of his professional life to something or other. And it didn't do an awful lot for his moods. You know, people never quite knew which Stan they were going to get at any given point. His compatriot in the Woody Herman Orchestra, the saxophone player Zoot Sims, once famously described Stan as a nice bunch of guys. And his relationship with Jimmy Rainey was just one of the many professional relationships that went very wrong because no one could handle the way Stan decided to live his life and the way he behaved, which was to be perfectly charming one minute and to be an absolute monster the next. The stories are legion. We won't bore you with them, but one of the great mysteries, I think, of Getz is how he could have been such an appalling man in his life and such an angel in his art, a monster in his life and an angel in his art, which was never more vivid than when you heard him playing a ballad. We're going to do something that was written by Victor Feldman, great expat British jazz pianist who went to Los Angeles to become a session musician, where he made a very good living playing marimba on Steely Dan records and things like that. But he's a beloved British jazzman as well, and he wrote this beautiful ballad that Stan liked to play a little bit later in his career. This is called Falling in Love. Stan had been at the top of his profession for most of the 1950s, and towards the end of the decade, he was burning himself out. Actually, he was just lucky to be alive, but he just took himself away from the American jazz scene for a while. Got himself a Swedish wife, went to Sweden, got a gig in the local TV orchestra, cycled to work, you know, things like that, normal things. I did that for a couple of years, and then he got a copy of Downbeat magazine, the jazz magazine, 1960, and he noticed at the top of the tenor saxophone polls, no longer did it say Stan Getz as it had done for the previous 10 years. It said John Coltrane. Whereupon Stan Getz immediately packed his bags and came back to reassert his position. And he did this in some extraordinary ways. There's an album he made in 1961, Live at the Gate. Live at the Gate's just been issued now, and it shows a man with something to prove. His playing is incendiary. It's extraordinary. 1961. That's the sort of stuff that was going on in the clubs. He was also making a record like Focus, which is still regarded as one of the, if not the greatest marriage of jazz saxophone and string orchestra, arranged by Eddie Sauter. Not only that, he got involved in a project put together by American guitarist Charlie Bird, who had collected some rather lovely Brazilian tunes while he was out on tour, and he came back. They're written by Antonio Carlos Jobim and Baden Powell and Louis Bonfa, all mellifluous, gorgeous Brazilian tunes. He thought Stan Getz would sound good on these. Invited Stan to come and play on them. Stan liked them. He flew in from New York to Washington to record them. Didn't think much of it. Flew back, got on with his gig, and then noticed that a tune that he'd recorded called Desafinado was creeping up the pop charts. Then he took some notice. Thereafter, of course, ensued what became known as the Bossa Nova boom. We'll hear a bit more about that a little bit later, but in the meantime, we're going to finish this first set with a little taste of the Bossa Nova boom. I suppose before we do, let me introduce you to the orchestra, just in case you're thinking of going. I recommend you don't. On the drums, Mr. George Double. Yeah. On the bass, the local boy made good, Simon Paterson. My name's Chris Ingham. I made a few phone calls, but really it's all about the magnificent talent that is Mark Crooks on the tenor saxophone. I'm duty bound to inform you that we've made an album called Stan. You're thinking, why did you bother? What's the point? Well, that's what we thought. We just fancied it, and actually it got very well received, including by one of Stan Getz's biographers, Dave Gelly, who would have thought would have been the first one to say, why did you bother, boys? He didn't. He said the very opposite. He said, this is great. Thank you very much. Well done, everyone. Sell it to your audiences with pride for £10 over there. Or if you don't have a CD player anymore, you can get the digital download if you listen to music in that modern way. I don't even know what that modern way is, but I do have a digital download for you, if that's what you want, the code. In the meantime, here is a little taster of what the Bossa Nova boom was all about before we take a little break.
I've got it on the click. Can we go in the desk, Chris? I've got it on my phone. We'll do it with the click. Sorry? We'll do it with the click. I've got the guitar on my phone. I've got the monitor on my phone. Just a backup. Backup.
Vai, 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 vai. So dance the samba, vai. So dance the samba, vai, 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 vai. So dance the samba, vai. Maya daio twista dici mais. Maya no mica se, o calypso o cha-cha-cha. So dance the samba, vai, 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 vai. So dance the samba, vai. Stan made dozens and dozens of bossa nova records, 1963, 1964. None of them involved Charlie Byrd, whose idea it was in the first place. Charlie Byrd was not invited to the bossa nova boom party. Stan decided he wanted to carry on making bossa nova records with Brazilian musicians, and Charlie Byrd was an American guitarist. Charlie Byrd wasn't even invited to the Grammy Awards when Desafinado was nominated for the Best Instrumental Performance of the Year. Stan Getz won. Charlie Byrd wasn't even at the ceremony. He was a bit miffed. He sued and won. So he got a little bit of money, but he didn't have the fun. Stan did dozens and dozens of sides. Verve Records stockpiled these bossa nova records. And he had a world beater with the album Getz Gilberto, which featured Girl from Ipanema, of course, also featured this particular tune that we're going to do. Gilberto, by the way, was João Gilberto, who was the guitarist singer, who was married to Astrid Gilberto, who was asked to do the English lyric on The Girl from Ipanema, because João couldn't sing in English. Astrid could sing in English. And this caused a great schism in the recording studio. Stan Getz and the producer, Creed Taylor, loved Astrid's English vocal. João Gilberto, her husband, and Antonio Carlos Jobim, the composer, really didn't like her vocal. And Stan Getz and Creed Taylor won. And that was the end of their marriage. Astrid Gilberto and João Gilberto went their separate ways, and Stan Getz moved in more ways than one. We're not going to do that one. We've done Girl from Ipanema anyway already. We are going to do something else from the album. This is a tune called Vivo Sonando, and it translates as I Live to Dream. very much. Vivo Sonando, Antonio Carlos Jobim. So he stockpiled a load of bossa nova recordings, but the truth is, Stan Getz was done with the bossa nova by around the end of 1964. He'd already moved on. It didn't matter how much money he was making playing bossa nova. He needed more stimulation. He formed a brand new band in 1964. We're going to come back to that band. We're going to forward 3 years to the next band he formed in 1967. There's a sort of 3-year cycle. He can just about tolerate other people, and they can tolerate him for about 3 years, and then he has to move on. 1967, his band had a pianist called Chick Corea, and they made a fantastic album in 1967 called Sweet Rain. And just like he had with Horace Silver, Stan Getz plundered the trunk of his piano player's compositions, and what we have here is the beautiful, mysterious Chick Corea waltz from Sweet Rain. This is called Windows. Thank you. Chick Corea's Windows from 1967. Let's go back to that band he formed in 1964. It contained Roy Haynes, Steve Swallow, Roy Haynes on drums, Steve Swallow on bass, and a 23-year-old Gary Burton on vibraphone. Really forward-looking, straight ahead, modern jazz of the sort that Verve Records had no interest in whatsoever, because they had a load of bossa nova records that they wanted to put out in Stan Getz's name. And this quartet made a fantastic record called Nobody Else But Me, great album, 1964. And it was shelved, and it didn't get released until 1994, 30 years later. Stan had been dead 3 years by then. And when it came out, the listening public couldn't believe it. What a fantastic band this was, what a great record it was. And of course, it was just put to one side for financial reasons. They did document this group, Verve Records, in 1966 in a live show, live in Paris. And we're going to do something from that album. This is a French tune that Stan was particularly taken with at the time, and it's called When the World Was Young. Okay. Late 1960s, Stan is wandering around Paris, taking a break from his marriage. And he's visiting his old jazz clubs that he used to play in the 50s, and he's distressed to find that half of them are shut, and the other half are only half full. He gets into a jazz club, and he sees this organ trio playing in the corner. Eddie Luis on Hammond organ, René Thomas on guitar. He's really taken with them. And he goes and introduces himself in the interval. Imagine that. You're the house band, and the guy comes up and introduces himself. And it's Stan Getz. And needless to say, that French organ trio became Stan's new band. And he brought them back to London and booked them into Ronnie Scott's for 2 weeks, recorded everything, booked them into Air Studios, and got George Martin to produce some studio recordings of them. 1971 this is. And they produced an album called Dynasty, double record, double album. And it's totally unlike anything that Stan ever recorded in the whole of his 45-year playing career. And we're going to do a tune from this record. This is a tune called Ballad for Leo, written by the guitarist René Thomas. As far as we can tell, nobody else in the world is doing this one. It's our opening track on our album, Stan. Ballad for Leo. very much. Ballad for Leo. Wasn't really a ballad at all. Who knows what it was? Interesting piece, though. Now, when Stan was signed to Columbia Records in the mid-1970s, one of his contractual stipulations that he was allowed to present musicians that he thought deserved a wider recognition by the listening public, as opposed to just being well thought of by other musicians. And one of those was the West Coast pianist Jimmy Rolls. And in 1975, he made an album called The Peacocks with Jimmy Rolls. The Peacocks was the title track written by Jimmy Rolls himself. And Mark and I will play it for you now. Thank you. Thank you. Jimmy Rolls as the Peacocks. Now, by the mid-1980s, lo and behold, Stan got himself clean. He junked the booze, he junked the junk, and he was all right. And he got himself a new band, featured Kenny Barron on the piano, and this formed the basis of his final kind of act of playing, which lasted from about 1985 till 1991, when he eventually succumbed. But that last period of 5 years playing features some of the most impassioned and moving playing of his entire career. And he was ready to record with this new band with Kenny Barron, and he was driving in to the session, and he realised he had a little panic attack on the way to the studio, because he realised he'd never ever recorded sober in his life, and he didn't know whether he could do it. And he pulled over. He actually pulled the car over and rang his then girlfriend and said, "I'm not sure I can go through with this." And she said, "Go on, of course you can. Off you go." Encouraged him into the studio, and of course he was wonderful. He was brilliant. He was better than ever, possibly. So that was all right. But this new kind of period of sobriety caused him to reflect a little bit on his previous behavior. You know, to whether it's to fellow professionals, fellow musicians, girlfriends, wives, everybody. And he said to Kenny Barron, he said, "I think I've got to make a few apologies. I think I'd better get on the phone." And Kenny Barron said, "Don't use a payphone." Good old Stan. We love him, really. We're going to do one more tune. In fact, we're going to do the tune that he was on his way in to record, the title track of this new album with the new band, Kenny Barron's Voyage. Before we do that, say hello and goodbye one more time to this magnificent orchestra on the drums. George Double. Yeah. On the double bass, Simon Paterson. Who needs a bit of a haircut, if you ask me. On the saxophone, my name is Chris Ingham. I'll make some phone calls on the saxophone. Mark Crooks. Thank you to those of you in the interval who showed interest in our CD. Stan on the digital download. Stan, thank you in advance to those of you who are going to show an interest on the way out. I'll just be here. Feel free to come and finger the merchandise with absolutely no obligation. Thank you very much. This is Kenny Barron's Voyage. Thanks for coming out. Thanks to Peggy's for having us. It's been a blast. Lovely.
Bye.